We can do film and tape digitization. We have one 8mm film scanner. We have one 16mm film scanner. We have two 16mm telecines, which are a little different than the scanners. That's the film side, and on the tape side, we have like 3 VHS decks, 3 beta decks, and 2 3/4-inch decks. And we also have a Video 8 deck, which is the most difficult to keep running.
The first machine we got from the Movie Stuff company was called a work printer. And that was a modified Elmo projector that had an optical kind of mechanism that you used your own video camera to capture the image, and then it would send a mouse click with every time the sprocket moved. When Movie Stuff came out with another machine, the Sniper, that did record soundtracks, we went ahead and got one of those, and that's what we've been using since. However, it kind of broke down about a year ago, and we've had a hard time finding someone who would work on it. Apparently, the Movie Stuff company doesn't work on those machines anymore. They want to sell you the new version.
It's an ingenious invention. It's amazing, and you can't beat it for the cost. But Roger is very interesting to work with, especially coming from kind of an archives background. You can see a lot of the difference in mindsets of somebody who kind of works with archives versus somebody who's kind of working in kind of production type environment, and even down to the way that like the manuals for the Movie Stuff are all online, so they could just kind of suddenly disappear, and the fact that like he no longer repairs old units and things like that. It's interesting, and nothing is forever, but it could be a little longer. We have our Movie Stuff Sniper 16 HD, and that's gotten from a place that's in Utopia, Texas, and they actually got that right before I got here, and I wish they had asked me before they got it, because they got the standard definition one at the time when HD was already out, and so the problem with using kind of standard definition and non-progressive scanning with one of those Sniper decks is you're putting film, which is just a beautiful image on its own, through the interlacing process. So then you're seeing these multiple fields of lines, and it's kind of breaking up images and making it from something that's just sort of one solid thing into this thing that has 2 frames across for every other line of film. It just looks jagged all the time. And so I was able to justify an upgrade with my department, and so we started the process of sending that into Utopia, Texas. So Zach Val and myself drove out there and brought it in, and he told us he would get it ready in 30 days, and then a year and a half later, we got it back. And it was the most stressful buying experience repair process I've ever had, ever. Like,
the one that I worry about is our Beta SP machine. We have one machine, and those are many orders of magnitude more complicated than a U-matic. And if and when that machine breaks down, I don't know what we're going to do. Because people who know how to repair that kind of machine are getting older and dying off, and there's just nobody who repairs those machines anymore.
Got a request from Alamo Drafthouse, wants to do a screening off legacy formats, and I was asked if it was couched as, where could I find this equipment? And when I was really like, yeah, I know you want to see if you can borrow from us, and that's fine. I don't have a problem doing that. And I told him that as far as Digibeta, I could loan him a Digibeta deck because we have a number of them. But he also needed 3/4-inch, and I'm just like, man, it costs us so much money to keep these things running that I don't want to let it out of my sight,
as Peter Brothers puts it, to repair those quadruplex machines, you have to get the person out of retirement to make the tools to fix the machine.
There's a fellow named or a company called Mr. Wizard up on Burnett Road who we learned about from the LBJ, the National Archives at the LBJ Library. And he can do things like projectors and simple electronics like VHS machines, and he's worked on our U-matic machines. But I'm not sure he can do a Beta SP.
We used to use Mr. Wizard, who was an amazing vendor, and then he suddenly just retired and left. It was really sad. And luckily, I knew about Ground Zero, who's in town, and that seems to be a two-person operation. It's Dana Crowell and then Roy, who does the engineering stuff. And they are totally not an archives, centric place. They mostly do stuff for TV production companies, kind of keep their systems running, build recs for them. And then they also do like post-production work, closed captioning, a lot of weird stuff. And I just saw their studio and it was amazing. And it made me really happy because I know that as a kind of business sector, archives are not big enough to support maintenance, a place that does maintenance. And that's why we can't keep places like Mr. Wizard around. Even though like he would kind of work for everybody, but there's not enough profit in kind of working on our stuff or just working on old equipment in general to keep a place in business. Because Roger doesn't repair items any longer, I definitely still use any kind of documentation that he has on his website. And I don't think I've done like a whole web crawl of his website to save it, but I've definitely saved documents that pertain to the equipment because I just don't believe they'll be there forever.
I was just on the Movie Stuff website today, actually, when I was having problems with some software to check to see if there was a new software update, but there wasn't. When it comes to software problems, I'll go to websites and look for software updates or driver updates. That's usually kind of like, if I can't get something to work by just noodling around with it, then I'll go to websites and do that. And then if I still can't get it to work that way, then I'll go to an engineer, or in the case of the scanners, the creator of them. And that's probably generally my progression.
We're also looking at the issue of the software that he uses for it, which was kind of made for another developer, and then he bought them out. But it's actually, it's some weird thing where it's still under a different company's name, Alternaware. But it's definitely, you buy it from Roger, and then that other person's like a ghost somehow involved in the situation. I don't know. It's weird. You never know if that's going to keep, making the next operating system leaps, too. So one thing I'm also doing is I try, and I know a lot of people locally try to do this. Afshin at Tammy, Quinn at the iSchool. We're always trying to find ways to be able to use those cameras without having to use the software. I actually had a researcher who found After Effects macro that could take those mouse clicks that the software uses and be able to process the film on its own, which seems like kind of exciting development.
The software that he has is kind of clunky. It works. There's having worked with his telecines for like 7 or 8 years, I got very used to it. Got a workflow down. The thing about his telecines is that they really always just really worked. I mean, they're very mechanical, and it's just a camera and a projector, and so the problems that we had with them generally came down to problems with our computer, not so much with the machines themselves. Sometimes a part would wear out, but he would generally fix them really quickly. But now that he's not servicing them anymore, that becomes a little bit more iffy, and like now I'm trying to find parts for some of our telecines to try and keep them running, but I'm having a hard time doing that. I was just at EMEA, and there were people talking about various resources, and I'm just going to get in touch with them because I know that they can point me in the right direction. Like, I was at this committee meeting, and somebody was talking about how he's having a hard time finding a part, and somebody else said, you can just get that machined. And it's like, apparently the plans exist out there to, like the CAD drawings to make this part for a 16 millimeter projector. So there are people out there making parts, and 3D printing is kind of also making that. Replacement parts can be made that way now as well. And I've found like adapters and plans, like 3D printer plans or whatever they're called, for various adapters and even film reels, and some 8 millimeter projector parts. I've seen them online.
The big problem is that for video and film, there are no standards still. VHS, we're still totally following a local custom, and that is what most likely started at TAMI, which is using DV for VHS, and it's not quite right. But it's really nice for file management. It records at about 13 gigabytes an hour, and it has intra-frame compression, so it's not dependent on other frames, so it's pretty stable files. But it's terrible with color. It's not, representing the original object as well as it could.
In terms of standardization of digital formats, from what I understand, I'm not a classically trained archivist, but I kind of follow the debates out there. And from what I understand, there is no one standard format that is agreed upon. And in terms of the formats that we use, they were really largely dictated to us by the equipment. When we first started digitizing film, the telecines that we got digitized DV. That's just what they did. And so DV video became our format. And so we standardized that across video. When we started doing video, we just got the same AD converter that was being used for the telecine to use with the tape decks.
Abby, our digital archivist, and Liz Gushy, who's in charge of the digitization unit, they've been mostly in contact with other institutions about standards, and usually it's metadata more than the formats or the digitization itself. It's metadata seems to be the big the big issue. And I've heard, and I totally believe this, that the biggest reason for loss of data on videotapes is inadequate labeling. It's not deteriorating tape or machine obsolescence. It's just not knowing what's on the tape and not being able to afford to copy a blank tape. So.
Honestly, as far as communicating information and finding new information, I'm probably mostly local, and then most of kind of dipping into the national conversation is through conferences or checking out the VADGI website, and then through message boards and things like that. But yeah, I tend to be just talking to people on a local level, and that's kind of having working groups that aren't working groups in name but tend to function that way, because it's kind of more low pressure, and then kind of stay in contact with students who have worked here but then kind of move on. I'm mostly getting asked questions. I don't get to ask questions too much.
When it comes to repairs, or if I have problems with equipment, I tend to talk to people I know who do the same thing as I do. And there's just a few people that I know. And then there's also people at the Alamo who are, they don't do digitization, but they're very technically savvy. And if I can't solve a problem that way, then I'll go directly to Telstar. I don't really have a very big network of people to talk to about problems with the equipment. It usually comes down to the engineer.
I mostly depend on AMIA, Association of Moving Image Archivists, and the listserv and conference have been invaluable for us making decisions about whether it's the digitization standard or codecs that we use or things like that. As far as video analog goes, I've been in contact with DC Video and Specs Brothers, and those are our two go-to places for difficult transfers. I've seen a couple of very good sessions at EMEA conferences that were very helpful with us setting up our video copying stations, and Bay Area Video Coalition gave a really good session and some handouts that we have used. We're pretty free with what we've been doing. We've been trying to put as much online as we can. I know that we do receive requests for information from other archives, but that's been going through Abby, our digital archivist, and Liz Gushy, who's in charge of the digitization unit.
A lot of the information that I get from talking to engineers or other people, unless they're in emails, they don't get really put anywhere. Like when I was picking up a deck from Roy, and he was telling me all these different things and different ways to clean, how often I should be cleaning, what to look for on the heads when they're scoring and stuff like that. I've talked to a few people about that outside and my experience with him and what he told me, and I share that with other people, but that's not written down. Until now, it's kind of there. But that's not something. I have manuals. Yeah, I have manual that I've made for like the use of our equipment. That's kind of one thing. And then I download manuals for the various decks and stuff and store them on the server. But as far as the more one-to-one knowledge that I get, that stuff's not written down. Maybe it should be.
So for sharing knowledge, we definitely have an in-house wiki. It's not great for pictures, so I'll tend to just make a Word document and attach it to it. And I know RTF is way better and all that. It's just a crappy wiki. It really is. And then kind of, and this might be an unfortunate thing, but most of the knowledge I share is kind of one-on-one and person-to-person. Because we're kind of a hub for so many people who pass through UT Austin and the high school, I have a really good amount of people that have passed through the Briscoe at some point and know that they can always ask me for advice. And then, I'll speak at the school occasionally and do like usually a lecture at the Survey of Digitization on film and video. But those are kind of the biggest ways I tend to do it. I probably need to work on making it a little bit more public and getting some stuff online.